So today, we're here to talk about our brand new CPU core. You've all been waiting for it. It's all about Zen 3.
Wow, wow, and wow. Could it be that at long last AMD has dethroned Intel as the gaming king? Well, judging by today's Ryzen 5000 launch featuring the Zen 3 processors, the answer is probably yes. We're going to go through the details very briefly, and I'm going to give you my top 3 takeaways for the PC building landscape, including whether or not you should buy one. Hello, welcome to PC Builder. I'm Jason. I am super excited about today's episode. Just finished watching the AMD Ryzen 5000 launch, and I've got a bunch of takeaways that I can't wait to share with you. Now, if you're new to the channel, PC Builder is all about taking all the techno mumbo jumbo and the market prices and distilling them down into something that'll help you create better price to performance builds. So you're just going to get more out of your gaming PCs, out of your productivity PCs. If you like this video, please leave us a like and subscribe for more content. Don't forget to click that bell icon as well. And with that, let's jump in today's super exciting launch. So number one, let's talk about AMD is now claiming that it has the gaming lead over Intel, and it offered up side-by-side benchmark charts, that's over there, to prove it. Now, in terms of gaming alone, AMD's claiming that the 5000 series beats the 3000 series by a whopping 26% and beats Intel in most titles, some of them really handily. Now, listen, we always want to wait for third-party reviews to verify these first-party claims. Yes, we're looking at you, NVIDIA, but right now, judging by the benchmarks in these games that are really well known, it does appear that it is the case that AMD is going to beat Intel in gaming in the upcoming launch. Now, what was really impressive was that they offered up titles that traditionally AMD struggled with. You can see over there Shadow of the Tomb Raider. You can see Far Cry New Dawn. These are titles that AMD typically has a disadvantage against the Intel processors for because they typically favor frequency and higher instruction per clock. Now, before we jump into how they did it, the first thing you're going to notice is that I'm saying Ryzen 5000, not Ryzen 4000. Clearly, AMD decided that with all their mobile processors using that 4000 series and their recently introduced APU, that's the desktop chips that are Zen 2 architecture, but have integrated graphics in them like the 4700G, they decided that lineup's already kind of confused enough, so they're going to skip that altogether and they're going to jump straight to the 5000 series. So how did they do it? How did they pull off what they're saying is a 19% overall performance jump, 26% in gaming? Well, it's due to two things. One is that with the, not only have they gotten a lot more in terms of the performance per watt, they've also massively reorganized the architectures. You can see just to my right, just to my left, my right, my left, as you can see on the slide next to me, they've gone from the older CCXs in the Ryzen 3000 series, which had 4 CPU cores per CCX, with each with 16 megabytes of cache, and they've combined those together into a single 8-core CCX with 32 megs of cache. Now, so what? Well, if you remember when the Ryzen 3100, that's the 4-core chip that came out about 6 months ago, and the 3300X came out, the 3100 with 4 cores and 8 threads had those 4 cores split across 2 different CCXs. The 3300X, which, let's be honest, was one step above vaporware because we never really saw it come into stock at all. But at least in the testing, what we saw was that the 3300X with the same number of cores, same number of threads, but on the single CCX had a huge latency improvement and huge FPS and performance improvement. That's what we're seeing them do now with the Ryzen 5000 series and the expanded CCX cores. Okay, so let's quickly go through the 4 chips they introduced today. Now, you see 3 of them up on the screen. We'll get to the next one, the 5950X. Let's start at the bottom of the product stack at the 5600X chip. That's a chip that they're going to introduce at $299 MSRP. Now, for those of you out there thinking, wait, the 3600 is only about $199. Usually you can even find it cheaper than that. This is a $100 jump. It's actually only a $50 jump because they're comparing this to the 3600X, which actually MSRP'd for $250. So what we're seeing is about a $50 price increase across the board. Now, we all know AMD tends to sell their chips far below the MSRP, so I would expect after the introductory period that we'll see the prices on these come down as well. And of course, I'm going to talk a little bit about this hole in their lineup below $200 in just a moment. But the 5600X comes in at $299 US. It's 6 cores, 12 threads, boost up to 4.6 gigahertz, base clock at 3.7. These are all vast improvements over the 3600X. 35 megabytes of cache. I don't understand why it's 35 megabytes, but then the 5800 is 36 megabytes. I almost think that's a mistake, but let's go with 35 megabytes for right now. And same power envelope. It's a 65 watt TDP. So this processor is going to come with an in-the-box cooler. They're saying this is going to be a Wraith Stealth cooler. Now, for those of you who bought a 3600X know, that came with a Wraith Spire cooler, which is the bigger, beefier cooler. So it is a little bit of a downgrade on the cooler, but frankly, you might just want to, at this price point, spend 25 or 30 bucks and get a Hyper 212 or a Gamix 400 or, insert budget cooler here. Getting the box cooler is not that big of a deal now that we're spending $300 for the chip. The next chip in the lineup is the 5800X. That's an 8-core, 16-thread, 4.7 gigahertz boost, 3.8 gigahertz base clock chip, 36 megabytes of cache at 105 watt TDP. So it's very similar to the existing 3800X chip, coming in at $449. About, I believe it's 50 bucks over what the 3800X was retailing for at MSRP. Hasn't been at MSRP for a while. Then we've got the 5900X. Now, it'll be interesting to see how they do this because, as I said before, their CCXs are 8 cores. This is a 12-core, 24-thread chip coming in at pretty impressive 4.8 gigahertz boost. I believe that's not going to be all core, of course. It's going to likely be single core or, maybe divide up among the CCXs. We'll see how they implement it. Then a 3.7 gigahertz base clock, pretty impressive 70 megabyte cache. Wow. And 105 watt TDP. Now, the 5900X and the 5800X are not going to come with a cooler. And frankly, at this point, that doesn't bother me at all. To me, these MSRPs, I know they're more, and anytime we go more, we're like, do I have to spend more? Yeah, look, these are just better chips. AMD has now decided they don't have to just compete on price anymore. They can now compete on performance because they just, again, if these benchmarks are correct, they're just going to beat Intel hands down. Finally, the big hitter in their lineup is the Ryzen 9 5950X. It is a 16-core, 32-thread, absolute monster at a boost clock of 4.9 gigahertz. Wow, they are like literally scraping the 5 gigahertz line, and I bet you with overclocking, you're going to be able to get there. 72 megs of L2 and L3 cache, 105 watt TDP, so very similar to the 3950X in that regard. The pricing, very similar. I think the 3950X came in at $749. So again, they've gone up about $50 in all markets. They didn't go up by percentage, which they could have easily done here. I actually think this is showing a lot of restraint on the price side, particularly given that they are overtaking Intel. So yeah, fantastic chip. Okay, so now let's get into the takeaways. Takeaway number 1. Intel's toast. I mean, I don't know what else to say. That Intel, years ago, lost the productivity benchmark crown. AMD's held that forever, primarily through their, the multi-threaded processes and their multi-core chips and their chiplet design process. And then AMD really took away the budget gaming segment, well, actually even the mid-range gaming segment, because they were close enough to Intel while being significantly cheaper that you're like, well, I'd rather spend the money on my GPU and get a better GPU because the CPU upgrade's not going to give me much, maybe 5-10%, whereas with a GPU upgrade, I'll get 20-25%. That just made a lot more sense. So the last segment Intel really held on to was unlimited budget or high-end budget gaming systems where, yeah, I've already upgraded the maximum, the best graphics card I had, which was a 2080 Ti until a month or two ago, and now it's going to be a 3090. But the only thing left to upgrade now is the CPU, and we're going to go with an Intel, 10900K or maybe a 10600K that's massively overclocked, right? With, $200-300 memory. So without that, what does Intel have? They're way behind. They're stuck on 14 nanometers. If they add one more plus to that 14 nanometer plus, I think they're going to just like fall right off the earth at this point. So Intel's got to do something. Okay, takeaway number 2, maybe the most important one. Where are the cheap Ryzen 5000 chips? The cheapest one we have here is $300. And these are a fantastic chip, don't get me wrong. But when Ryzen 3000 launched, we had the Ryzen 5 3600 non-X at $199. So it's one thing for AMD to say, well, the 5600X is the same as the 3600X and it's only going up by $50. That's great. But you didn't give us the cheaper one. So what does that mean? Really, I think that there's one of two things is going to happen here. Either AMD is going to be launching a non-X 5600 or slightly less performance chip. Maybe they'll call it 5500. Who knows what they're going to call it. Coming up relatively soon. Or they are planning a very steep discount of the 3000 series lineup. The 3700X, the 3600X, the 3600. Because Black Friday is going to be here in a month and a half. The holiday shopping season is coming. They don't have the same lead time that they had around the original Ryzen 3000 launch. If you remember, that happened in the summer, early summer, and they had a long time before Black Friday. And they kept the price of those Ryzen 2000 chips, the older chips, relatively high the whole time. I know because I was sitting there waiting for them to discount the damn things, and they just wouldn't do it until Black Friday, and then they absolutely cratered those prices. So if you're looking to build a budget system right now and you're looking at getting a 3600-ish, $150, $199 CPU, I'd wait. I'd absolutely wait till Black Friday and see what happens because I suspect you're going to see some deep discounts on the 3000 series lineup if they're not going to launch a 5600 with no X after it that's going to be a cheaper chip. They're not going to want to lose that market segment. And Intel, if they're smart, and Intel, if you're listening, they would discount the crap out of their 10th gen i5s right now. Maybe even the i3 10100, take that below the Ryzen 3100. That's their opportunity. Whether or not they take it, we'll see. But if you're building a budget system, I'd just sit on my cash right now for another month, wait till Black Friday, and then buy something then. Okay, so should you buy a Ryzen 5000 series chip? If you are a content creator, if you do productivity work, and this is what you're buying the CPU for primarily, no questions about it. Go. Obviously, caveats always wait for the benchmarks. Make sure that what AMD is saying is accurate. Now, AMD, to their credit, has been really, I feel like, straight with consumers around this stuff. Hello, NVIDIA. Take a lesson here. Anyway. So I would feel fine even if you were going to buy it on launch day. I don't like to buy things on launch day, but if you were going to buy it on launch day, I wouldn't freak out about it. I think that you'll probably be fine in that regard. If you're a gamer, however, I think there's two different ways to go. The first is if you're going to buy a high-end or a mid-range system, and by that I mean you're putting in at least an RTX 3070, 2070, 3080, 3090, 2080 Ti, like high-end graphics card, maybe one of the AMD big Navi cards is coming down the pike. You're going to be in a situation where you're going to be CPU bound primarily, not GPU bound if you buy a Ryzen 3rd gen or if you buy an Intel 10th gen series. I would then go ahead and spend the extra $50, $60 and go ahead and get a 5000 series CPU and enjoy that performance. It's going to be a big uplift for you. If, however, you're on the lower end, if you're going to put in a 1660 Super or even a 5600 XT or even a 2060 Super, frankly, I think you're better off taking the extra money that you would have invested in the CPU, maybe not for the 2060, but or the 5600, and dumping it into a better graphics card. That's generally where you're going to get most of your gains. And again, that goes until you're bumping into the 3070 range. If you can even get a freaking 3070. If you can't get a 3070 because the stock just sucks, which is the case with the 3080s and 3090s, and AMD, you can't get one of their cards either, then yeah, think about investing it in the CPU as a long-term investment, of course. Otherwise, I would tend to shy away from it and plow that additional savings into the next graphics card up because that's where you're going to get your performance. So that's going to do it for today's video. I am going to have best motherboards for Ryzen 5000 series coming out very soon now that we know all the details about them. I've already got a couple lined up that I'm excited to share with you. So remember, please join us, help us out, give the video a like, and click subscribe if you're interested in that kind of content coming up, and click the bell icon. Thank you very much for watching. Excited to do this next part with everybody, and we'll catch you on the next one.